withdrawal and reliance on inner order in a chaotic situation. What happens to a lot of 21/6s is that they experiment with control when they're young. And because it blows up in their face, because it's supposed to, because that's how they learn, that's their learning arc, then they go up onto the hill and only control their own lives. They are always the reluctant controllers. Yes, I could control that, but I don't want to. I'd rather avoid it. I'd rather stay away from it. And why should I teach those people? Because if I teach them, I have to control them, and I don't want to control them, so why bother? I'm going to sit up here on the hill and stay away from all the chaos, because I know that chaos comes from trying to control. Until finally that sixth line can meet control that's legitimate. Please understand, control is not legitimate unless it brings the valued education that eliminates resistance to control. This is the whole thing. In other words, control is something that has to be acceptable to the controlled. And it can only be acceptable through education. If they are educated properly and they still don't want to be controlled, get rid of them. Fire them. Shoot them. Put them aside somewhere in a pasture. But at least that is clear for the 21. So the business here within this 21st gate, when you see this in somebody's design, is for them to understand the importance of being in control, to honor the way they get there through whatever their definition and type is, but for you to remember that the whole process of being in control is the direct result of learning and teaching that we found in the 17. That it's the Bodhisattva's next move, is to bring the teaching and the correct opinions to the totality, through the tribe, through control, through being able to establish the proper facilities and the proper process by which the tribe can be educated. And that's the first rule of all 21s, that control must serve. It must serve. And it can only serve if it is clear, that is, if the controller is educated and the controlled are educated as to why it exists. Nothing worse than blind control. That's dictatorship. Most of us refuse to be controlled in a dictatorial way. And that you will see in the world that dictatorships can only exist successfully where there is great ignorance in the world, where there is great poverty and ongoing crisis, so the dictators are constantly given the power of control. The more educated we become, the more that control is something that is legitimate for us, because this is what's provided us with the basis of our modern civilization. Schools, teaching programs, all of these things that come out naturally out of the 21. When you get to the 6th line, if you have a child that's a 21/6, I hope you're unemotional. They will try to take control of everything and anything, because control is what their life is all about. To see clearly what control is, what is the correct education, what is the way in which the tribe can be improved, all of that stuff that's inherent in the 21. The line is called chaos. And it says, where ineffective action leads to disorder. In the white book with the Pluto, because it's easier to see it first, where the ego is out of touch, the display of willpower leads to disorder. The ego is only out of touch when it is not taking into consideration the impact of control on others. And everything about the transpersonal gates is about recognizing that control is something that is always going to be difficult for the other unless they are properly educated and it is clear why the control is necessary. The sixth line in the beginning of its process, like all six lines, has to get burnt. So it controls for the sake of control and tries controlling everything. And of course it leads to all kinds of inappropriate action, which gets censured and punished, as ego always does. These are wonderful people. I mean, as long as you're not their parents, and they're wonderful people, because by the time they've gone through all of that chaos, they're the only ones who know what chaos really is. And because they know what chaos really is, they know how to avoid it and ultimately become great teachers in the way of all six lines. You know, the 21-5, the factory's in trouble. The 21-5 has been hired, brought in as the new dictator in order to save the company. And it's the 21-6 that's asked whether it thinks that that 5 can actually do the job because it knows whether it will bring chaos or not. And they're of enormous value to the tribe. It's what you would call in the old days, well, not in the old days, backroom politician. You know, the one who's never really in front, but the one that everybody has to go to make sure that the deal will really work, and the one to go to get the advice to find out whether the deal is really of value. It comes from the 21-6, but remember, wherever you see an introduction to a line, you know it's a long process. Don't get confused in that. You may get the chaos instead of the wisdom. In the Black Book, the Exalted, the war of attrition, the continuance of legitimate action in the hope of eventually succeeding despite all odds and increasing disorder. This is the early stage, control for control's sake, no matter what. And what that leads to. Remember, in reading somebody's line, it is never about changing the line. It's always about accepting the process. And what you will find is that the difficult nature of a line is almost always associated with lines that have an introduction. In other words, what it's saying is, this is a process that you have to move through, and you're going to go through all of this chaos until you finally get to that point that's there for you. When you discover that ineffective action leads to disorder. Not simply for yourself, but for others. You know, why control somebody's costume that they wear if it doesn't affect productivity? In other words, to learn all of these various things about what control leads to chaos, what control leads to productivity, this is the long-term process that's here in this sixth line. We come to the 12th hexagram. Standstill. The quality of restraint and the importance of meditation and inaction in confronting temptation. The sixth line. As I said, we are in a fifth line stage evolutionarily. And in the next century, in the coming years, we're going to begin the process of entering into the sixth stage. This is the end of a mutative chain. It's the beyond even the process. That is, it's the roof of the house. So it's beyond the process. It is called metamorphosis. It says faith in and energy applied towards change and the emergence from standstill. Creative transcendence that when connected to the harmonic gate 22 through the channel of openness leads to successful mutation and the emergence of a new social form. And you'll notice that this particular line, a line of great importance, because it is out of the 12th gate that mutation is expressed. It's expressed and explained that this is also a Sun-Earth combination. And so when you think about this left angle cross of education, you'll see that when it comes to the sixth line, you're going to have the Sun people And you're going to have the earth people, and they're very different. It says something about what's going to happen when the mutation comes. That there will be a resistance to the mutation. That there are those who will accept the new form, recognize the new form, embrace the new form. And there will be those that reject the new form out of fear. Because if you think that the emotional system is powerful now, wait till it's aware and penetrates in a way that we have no experience with. And these children will come into the world ill-equipped. So the sixth line speaks of the future better than most lines, because it tells you what metamorphosis always brings. It always brings the same thing. The positive adaptation to mutation and the negative resistance to mutation. Always. And it isn't to say that those that resist a mutation are bad. The fetus in the womb mutates and goes through many stages. When it gets rid of its capacity to breathe water, does not mean that that apparatus is bad. It just no longer serves a purpose. And it must resist the mutation because it's not its job to mutate and stay with the body. It's its job to complete itself and be done with it. So this is not about good or bad. But it does tell you about the basic binary. It says that you cannot have everyone participate in the totality as one. You cannot. Half. Half of anything is perfect. So metamorphosis. In the White Book, the capacity to mutate and express new social forms, or the perfected adaptation to caution that can accept social limitations. And of course, this is the part where they simply can see that, can recognize it, but still not be able to participate in it. 12/6s try. One of the most common things that happens to 12/6s is that against their will and against their dream, when they're young, they're often put into boarding houses or sleepaway schools or this kind of thing. They end up in social situations that they don't belong in, and they quickly recognize that. And that's their way of getting burnt, getting into the social matrix and then suddenly realizing what that does for them, and then slowly moving away to take on the natural caution of the 12th gate, to back away from the social interaction. But the sixth line is waiting for the mutation because it carries that genetically. It's waiting for a different kind of social interaction. When those babies come into the world, it is those beings around them, the parents around them, who carry 6 lines, wherever they may be, but particularly those who carry the 6 lines in this stream of emoting that moves from the 39 to the 55, 22, and all the way up. Because through that 6th line, they will have a way of being able to reach out and to be able to comfort these children. At its mundane level now, very little happens with the 12/6. Very little happens. It's really like it's dormant, waiting. And they're not very social as a result of that. They're waiting for a new kind of social phenomena. Waiting for a new kind of social phenomena, logically I would guess, leads you to the love of humanity and duty.